Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It is always up to speed with Formula One. It is Sunday, December 5th, 2021. This is Mark Day. Welcome you back to the show. Mr. Mark Hamilton will be back on Thursday night and can't wait to get him back because after the race that we had today in Saudi Arabia, I certainly do not really want to wade through this one on my own this evening. But hey, it is what it is, and we'll see where we come out on the flip side. But anyways, wow, what an afternoon that was at Jeddah for the very first Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Anyways, before we get into it, a quick look at the race or classification for the very first Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I'll just pull up the first 10 point paying positions in my notes here. Winning it was Lewis Hamilton, coming home in front of Max Verstappen. Valtteri Bottas rounding out the podium for Mercedes. Esteban Ocon, no, you did not hear that incorrectly. Esteban coming home fourth for Alpine. Fifth was Danny Ricciardo for McLaren. Sixth, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri. The seventh was Charles Leclerc, leading home the first of the two Ferraris. Obviously, Carlos Sainz was eighth. Antonio Giovinazzi in his second to last race for Alfa Romeo, coming home ninth. And 10th was Lando Norris in the second Mercedes. Now going over to the driver's standings, tied dead even between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton after 21 races. Both of these drivers on an equal footing of 369.5 points. Max leading the championship by virtue of winning 9 races, which I believe is one more than Lewis. Valtteri Bottas third with 218 points. Sergio Perez not collecting any points today in Saudi Arabia, sitting fourth on 190. And then Charles Leclerc rounding out the top five in the Drivers' Championship with 158 points, just 4 points ahead of Lando Norris and just under 10 points ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz in seventh. In the constructors, is it safe to say that Mercedes has got this one wrapped up with one race to go? Anyways, the Arrows, 587.5 points. Red Bull 559.5, Ferrari 307.5, McLaren's 269, and Alpine 149 points. So that gap between Ferrari and McLaren still sitting at roughly 40 points. And you have to think, like we've been saying on the show here for the past couple of weeks, this one has got to be sewn up for Ferrari. But wow, what an afternoon that was. And part of the reason I'm waiting so late to do this was because I had to go back and watch this a bunch of times. I had to go through about 3 different shifts to actually watch the race. Just it was a crazy afternoon in my own household here. And very much like Steve Williams, the YouTube live chat, he says, please be gentle. I'm still recovering from a crazy race. Steve, brother, I feel you. I think we're all the same. I was on the TSN Racing Pod with our good friend Tim Haraney this afternoon to help recap the race, and I still don't know what we really saw. It was something. It was really, really something. I've come to the conclusion after 21 races, Max, I love you. Lewis, I love you. Red Bull, Mercedes, love you guys. Toto, Christian, Marco, you know what, guys? I think I think we need some time apart. We're going to go to Yas next weekend, and one way or another, we're going to get this thing sorted out. But this was yeah, obviously it was intense, but there was so much going on in this race. I've got 2 pages of notes that I sat and wrote down because I had to get this all right in my head, because doing the TSN Racing Pod, Tim had this all written down, and I'm pretty sure I mixed up a couple of the incidents and myself here. So, anyways, the first start was not great for Max. Lewis gets away, Valtteri gets away, he gets second place and forms that barrier between him and Max, and that's where it stays for the first 10 laps or so. Then you have Mick Schumacher sliding into the barrier. You get a safety car. They decide to red flag the race after a little bit. It was interesting too, because it just seems almost a given now. Anytime that something happens between that, either Mercedes or Red Bull feel that they've been slighted or they've been put in a disadvantage, their drivers are automatically on the radio. First of all, behind the safety car while they're dealing with Mick Schumacher's accident, Max is complaining about Valtteri going too slow, and because they were obviously trying to pull off the double stack for the Mercedes boys, and well, I believe Martin Brundle on the Sky commentary, he made the comment that he was going too slow and he's not supposed to be doing that. Ultimately, it was a bit of a moot point because they ultimately did red flag that session. They were allowed to go in, change tires, change any parts on the car that needed replacing, etc. But it was an interesting one, and ultimately I guess a little bit of a footnote to the race because it never really got dealt with. And then when you go back to the well, let's make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself here, because you go back to the second start. There's a better start for Max. Lewis was first in the quarter. Max is inside, but makes the overtake by running off onto the infield going into turn 1 and 2, which is a very fast kind of flick to the left and to the right. Then this is, quickly brought to another standstill because just in a couple of corners later, you have cars all running, line abreast. You have Sergio Perez get tagged on the right rear tire by Charles Leclerc. That kind of sets off a whole chain reaction, which ultimately ends up with Nikita Mazepin driving up the back of George Russell. And here we go again. So while that's all being dealt with, and we're all looking to find out, well, what happened and why are there bits of cars all over the place and why are there cars facing the wrong way down the track, etc., the replays going on and the discussions are going on. I thought it was fascinating too, because you get this race radio broadcast between Red Bull and Michael Massey, the F1 race director, where they're basically bartering and bargaining between what's going to happen, because that turn 1 incident where Max runs off into the infield, he doesn't he doesn't really have time to give Lewis the position back, but basically Michael Massey gives him the opportunity at the next restart to start behind Lewis Hamilton. And on top of this, while this is all happening, you have Esteban Ocon, who's in the mix there as well. You end up going to the next restart where you have Ocon, Hamilton, and Verstappen. And, Red Bull wisely decided right away to accept that. I mean, what else were they, were they going to do? But now you go to the third restart, which is now on lap 17, which is crazy because, I was watching it and I'm looking at how this thing unfolds. And I think by this time, I don't even know how much time has elapsed. I was starting to wonder, well, I guess I have to look at the timing rules precisely, but I was starting to wonder, is this actually going to get in within the whole 2 hour time limit? It certainly didn't seem like it, but I suppose with the red flag session, it changes things up a little bit. Anyways, third time's a charm if you're Max Verstappen. You have a great start from Max, who's starting third, and he makes a very, very brave pass down the inside, going to turn 1, three abreast with Lewis Hamilton and Esteban Ocon. So Max, that was a great pass. And unfortunately, I think if you're a fan of Max Verstappen, that this is going to be a highlight that I think that is going to be overlooked due to all the drama and all the things that happened before and after this incident. Anyways, Hamilton stuck behind Ocon for only a lap. And then it's just crazy, because then by the time you get to lap 36, Hamilton goes to pass Max down starts finish. Going into into turn 1, Max breaks late, runs through the infield again. Max has to give the position back. It's on the radio that he has to give the position to Hamilton. Now, from what I understand, before this all happened on start finish, that there was a series of radio broadcasts from the race director telling them Red Bull to give it back. And I don't know, and I can't confirm this. This is only from other people that I've spoken to that have a little bit more access than I do. But from what I understood was that they were in the process of relaying this to Lewis, that Max was going to have to give up that position by running into the infield once again, that turn 1-2. So Lewis wasn't actually expecting him to slow down. Now there's some speculation that maybe both of these two guys were kind of trying to game the DRS line, so that Max could let Lewis pass and then try and take advantage of being within 1 second, and therefore activate the DRS. But the whole point is that Lewis went straight up the back of him, damages his rear wing, and that just wow, it was crazy. And again, Martin Brundle on Sky Sports on the commentary, the color, he thinks that it might have been a bit of a misunderstanding. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I mean, that was the most controversial, point in the race. Obviously, going to lap 42, Verstappen retakes the lead. Then he's given a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining advantage several laps earlier, which is the first time at this point that the stewards have actually weighed in on it. And then on lap 43, Lewis retakes the lead and then ultimately goes on to win the race after lap 50, several laps after that. Now, well, it is just so difficult to kind of keep up with all the things that obviously went on and transpired through all of that. Now, if you go and look at the race steward's verdict, because ultimately Max was penalized another 10 seconds after the race, there was a full verdict that was released by the stewards, who released their report, gave it to Michael Massey, the race director. And anyways, it's kind of a long and lengthy statement, but the key takeaway from this is that the second to last paragraph in the statement saying, however, the sudden braking by the driver of car 33 was determined by the stewards to be erratic and hence the predominant cause of the collision, and hence the standard penalty of 10 seconds for this type of incident is imposed. Now, this is interesting because Dr. Helmut Marko from Red Bull told the motorsport.com, first of all, he called it an extraordinary race. He went on to say, quote, Red Bull is not happy and we don't accept the decisions. Our engineers are preparing that we can prove Max was constant with his braking and he didn't brake test like Hamilton said. Then he crashed into our car. He unfortunately put 2 cuts in the rear tire that was so severe that we couldn't attack anymore. We had to take the speed out. That was one thing. The next thing was the second start. Hamilton was more than 10 car lengths behind. Sebastian Vettel got penalized in Budapest when he did it. But with this maneuver, Hamilton, was preparing his tire better for the start. Then he pushed Max off, no reaction. So we feel we are not treated the same, end quote. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, first of all, a couple of takeaways here. I'm sure they're going to look at the telemetry. I guess they're going to probably appeal this decision. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really make any difference because the 10-second penalty that was applied didn't actually affect the race classification. I think this is more of a statement by the stewards, if anything, just signaling what is and what is not acceptable going into the season finale. And sure, you know what? Go back 6-8 months, however long it's been since we had that first race at Bahrain, and we saw that looked like it was going to be a pretty tight season between Verstappen and Hamilton, and we wanted it to go as long as possible. And well, I guess careful for what you wish for. Yes, it's been dramatic at times. Silverstone, Monza, Brazil, and now today. But now we're going down, and it's basically coming down to a one race shootout, winners takes all. And I think they have to do something. I don't even sit these guys down together and just lay it out on the line what is and what isn't going to fly. So it is interesting that they believe that the data and the telemetry is going to prove them right. I would expect that they'll probably want to appeal this and put that to the stewards. The big gap between Hamilton and Verstappen at the restart, the second restart, I think is an interesting one because I think that was a very valid point. Max made comment of it on the radio. It was mentioned on the commentary on the television stream, and it was pretty obvious to see because I mean, the longer that Max sits there, the more that his tires and brakes are cooling. And it was very, very interesting too, because it wasn't, I mean, Lewis was obviously more than the 10 car lengths behind, but even the rest of the field just closing up. I mean, that was another thing that was remarked upon by Martin Brundle, who not very much got past him this afternoon. Did make the comment too that it was taking the rest of the fields an extraordinarily long amount of time to form up on the grid to get ready for that second start. So it is kind of interesting that that wasn't ruled upon or noted, but at some point, I guess Mark and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I mean, draw the parallel into any number of North American sports, which obviously doesn't relate to Formula One, but the one phrase that a lot of us will be familiar with when it comes to, let's say, hockey or basketball or football to a certain degree is the referees have put their whistles in their pockets, right? They're letting them play. But I guess that goes to the discussion that we've had quite a few times, and we've had so many messages, so many emails and tweets from people just about the consistency and the application of the rules and by the stewards all season long. And for this one point, I actually find myself agreeing with Helmut Marko, especially if Vettel got penalized for the same infraction at the Hungarian Grand Prix for being more than 10 car lengths behind at the restart. That obviously is an infringement of the rules. So if it is in one case, it has to be in another case for exactly the same thing. Now, when it comes back to the incident between Hamilton and Lewis, sorry, the Hamilton and Verstappen and the supposed brake test, yeah, I mean, it obviously looked like he slowed down and then speeded up immediately on the television feed. But let's see what the data brings out. But as I'm sure everybody here wants to see, I want to see this one decided cleanly and fairly, and ultimately in an exciting fashion next weekend in Abu Dhabi. But at this point, I just don't have any faith in that. Anyways, I've got a lot more to say on this subject. I'm finally starting to get into my groove here because it's now 11 p.m. Pacific time. And like I said, it's taken me a long time to collect my thoughts on this race. Anyways, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment and we'll pick it up and discuss further. So don't go away. Okay, welcome back to the show. We are talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We are talking about, I would say, that incident, all those incidents. It was a very, very strange and crazy race, and that is an understatement, perhaps, of the entire year. I mean, I finished watching this race a long, long time ago earlier today. I'm still finding different things to go back and try to keep it all straight in my head and not mix up too many things and probably not doing a very good job about it. Anyways, let's talk more about that incident between Lewis and Max Verstappen. Just wanted to tidy that one up, put a bow in it for now. Yeah, I guess ultimately we'll see what the data brings from Red Bull, but certainly the TV pictures to a certain extent did make it look like he had slowed down. I thought originally that perhaps Max was more in the middle of the track when it happened, but no, I think he did leave him quite a lot of room, and he was further over to the outside of the track than I thought. So anyways, I mean, if he did lift and that led to Lewis driving up the back of him, then yeah, I'm sure that is justifiable for causing an accident, the time penalty, and all that. But boy, it was really something. Lewis Hamilton did say that Verstappen was over the limit with not just one but all of the moves he made at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Lewis had the following to say, quote, "For me, I really have to try and just keep my cool out there, which was really difficult to do. I raced a lot of drivers through my life. In 28 years, I've come a lot of different characters, and there are a few at the top which are like over the limit. Rules kind of don't apply or think of the rules. Today, I was just trying to do my talking on the track, keep my car between the white lines, and do it the right way." End quote. And then when he was asked about what about those drivers that were over the limit, Lewis went on to say, quote, "He's over the limit for sure. I've avoided collisions on so many occasions with the guy. I don't always mind being the guy that does that because you live to fight another day, which I obviously did." End quote. So yeah, and what more do you have to say to that? Again, another comment in the live chat from Steve. Both teams were playing games today. Bottas holding up Max, so Merck could double stack the pit was interesting. That absolutely was, and I think that Lewis, to a certain extent, knows how to play Max. Mentally. I mean that turn one was sort of kind of similar to turn four at Brazil that we saw a couple of weeks ago. This is what really kind of kicked off the whole discussion. I mean, Lewis charging down Max in the quicker car. He pushed him and was going to pass him, and that one Max, supposedly braking late. He goes wide. He runs off the track, kind of pushes and takes Lewis with him. Lewis passes him. I mean, nothing was done at that point. That left a kind of a big void because a lot of the drivers had to weigh in on that. Why wasn't it penalized? And okay, at least I know where I stand if something similar happens to me in the future. And for one reason or one way or another, that's kind of set a precedence by not really doing anything, right? So, I mean, if it was a one-off incident, I guess you could make arguments that okay, well, you can just kind of it was kind of borderline. You can make the case that Max just ran wide, or on the flip side, he pushed Lewis wide. There was a case to be made for both, but I think that in a similar situation today, Lewis knew exactly how to play that one, regardless if he was trying to go up the inside or out around the outside, like he did in the second incident when Max ran wide later in the race, and then gave that position back. That kind of led to the most dramatic and controversial incident of Lewis driving up the back of him. But Lewis is about the only person that I've heard so far to hear that. The team principals involved. I think Toto was being quite diplomatic. I haven't heard anything or read anything, but that may be a little bit contrary. There might be some comments by the time that this goes out to air that it would be Toto has said something different. So Hamilton, just talking about the turn 27 incident, he said that he was confused. Lewis's exact comment is, quote, "I didn't quite understand why suddenly Verstappen hit the brakes pretty heavily. I ran into the back of him and then he moved on, so I didn't understand exactly what was going on. I got the message afterwards that he was going to let us pass, so it was a bit confusing," end quote. So again, that goes back to the comments that I heard, from other sources, that message was relayed first from race director to Red Bull, which relayed it to Max, and then was in the process of being relayed from race directors to Mercedes to Bono, who would have then forwarded that message to Lewis. So the sequence is a bit confusing. So it sounds like it was not intentional, but again, at the end of the day, if Max did something different, dangerous, and it did cause an accident, I guess as long as they don't pull Albon out of the woodwork and get him to do sort of like bizarre resimulation of the whole incident, I'm kind of cool with that. Anyways, Huffles Puffle says in live chat, "Hi Mark, can't hear to wait. Your thoughts on that insane race? Glad to watch you live." Yeah, man. I, I'd be glad to hear my thoughts on this one too, because I'm really having trouble to pull this one together myself. Anyways, finish up Lewis's comments, just talking about that incident driving up the back of Max Verstappen. Quote, "I tried to be as sensible and tough as I could be out there, and with all my race experience over the years, just keeping the car on the track and staying clean, that was difficult. But we persevered as a team. We've had all sorts of things thrown at us during the second half of the season, so I'm just really proud of everyone," end quote. So yeah, again, I was kind of thinking, going back to all the drama that we've seen. It's now it's well, I mean, it's between Lewis and Max, and it has been all season long. And at this point, I can't honestly say, would I be happier to see Lewis Hamilton win the championship next week and pad his legacy and become the outright greatest of all time? I mean, Lewis, we already know you're the GOAT. 7 championships or not. I mean, you're already up there. Max, do I want to see you become the world champion? I mean, you're undoubtedly a very, very talented driver, but some of these moves that we've seen, they've been pretty borderline, and do you really want to win it that way, or do you want to do it like Lewis and try and be clean and do it the right way? I guess it's just been so intense over the last several races. I mean, I guess when it all kicked off was really back in Silverstone, and we've seen it flare up obviously at Monza, and the one in Brazil was a bit of a. I mean, they obviously didn't come to to an accident to that point, but today it really was all over the place. I was joking around with some people that this was kind of like prison rules Formula One. It's kind of like anything goes. It was like or a bar fight is like stools being smashed and pool cues and God only knows what. It wasn't clean. And I think the track was obviously that played a part of it. I'm not going to completely absolve drivers of poor decisions and things that happened, but I do want to talk a little bit more about that, because I want to just talk briefly about Max's comments. Anyways, Max had the following to say, quote, Luckily, the fans have a clear mind about racing because what happened today is unbelievable. I'm just trying to race, and this sport these days is more about penalties than about racing. For me, this is not Formula One, but at least the fans enjoyed it. I gave it all today, but clearly not quick enough, but still happy with seconds. A lot of things happened with which I don't fully agree with, but it is what it is. I mean, at least I tried it on the track, to give it all. End quote. And then when talking about the incident with Lewis, Max said the following to say, quote, I slowed down. I wanted to let him by, so I'm on the right, but he didn't want to overtake. And then we touched. I don't really understand what happened there, end quote. So, I mean, at least at the end of the day, when it comes to the one incident that between Lewis and Max, which was the most controversial, forget all the escapades at turns 1 and 2 there, that neither of them can really get their mind around what happened in that start finish straight after turn 27, or sorry, turn 26, when they collided there. I mean, I don't really understand. Uh, I don't really understand it either. I mean, if they don't understand it, it's the two guys that were directly involved. What hope do we at home here have? Very, very little. Huffles Puffle says in live chat, Max's borderline dirty moves are definitely leaving a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. That makes me think he's truly not ready to be a world driver champion. But what do I know? Shruggy. Yeah, it certainly is. It's interesting. Nothing against Max or nothing against Lewis, but can we maybe just give the championship to one of the Ferrari guys or to maybe Lando or something? I mean, it'd be unorthodox, but it would make for maybe a different way to end off the season. But like I said earlier in the show, that for better or worse, now we're getting what we wanted. And like I say, careful for what you wish for, because now it comes down to a race shootout at Yas Marina next weekend, winner takes all. And at this point, considering how good Lewis's car has been over the past couple of races, I mean, the fact that he's just been quicker than Max, um, and just the momentum that he has. And I think to a certain extent that Lewis has gotten in between Max's ears. I think that when it comes down to the psychological battle between these two guys, I think that Lewis is clearly on top of that one when it comes to the mental side of it. And if there's a situation at Yas next weekend that's similar to what we saw today, would to say or see what we saw at Brazil a couple of weeks ago, I think that you got advantage if you're Lewis Hamilton, because he knows how to play that now, right? Another comment from Pratika Barjwaj in the live chat: opinion about Max when he's catching someone, he's probably the best in terms. He's probably the best in terms of defense. Max has always been over aggressive and tried to push his opponents off the track and gain an advantage. Yeah, good observation. Totally agree with that. I mean, they did come up with a rule about that a couple of years ago, right? Um, this is a bit of cheeky comment from Steve Williams in live chat. I think Mazepin was relieved to be DNF'd early on. Terrifying crash, but I got a sense he was always nervous to race on the track. And, absolutely. I mean, Carlos Sainz made a couple of comments about that in the leading up to that, and one of them was that if something happens up the track when the field is compressed, you're going to be right on top of it before you even really know what's going on. And Mazepin and George Russell very much bystanders as everybody was slowing down. What with Leclerc and pardon me, and Perez touching further up, and then Checo getting spun around like that. The rest of the field slowing down, and Mazepin just sadly a bystander. And you guys know at this point that we're not really fans of Nikita Mazepin, but you can't blame him at that point, because the time to react and the I mean, it was just a fraction of a second, and he was just along for the ride. And unfortunately, he and George Russell were forced out of the race. Thankfully, neither of them was hurt even minorly, but it could have been a lot scarier. Some of the other comments that some of the drivers made. George Russell said that Formula One has a lot to learn about the danger at Jeddah. Checo Perez said that the circuit is unnecessarily dangerous. And wow, certainly, I think that there's aspects to this track that are nice, but certainly it needs some work. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to come back. Got a couple more thoughts on this one, specifically about the track itself, and then just want to weigh in on the race this or next weekend, the season finale. So don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, welcome back to the podcast. As always, up to speed with Formula One. Still trying to get my mind around the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Just going back to the driver's comments about the safety of the track itself. I mean, there was concerns about that before the race itself when they got there midweek. Lewis Hamilton's pole setting lap came in at 253.98 kilometers an hour. It's the fastest street circuit on the calendar. It's the second fastest track on the calendar behind Monza, which is, the temple of speed, and is absolutely an awesome track. Yeah, my thoughts on the track, I think it definitely has some potential, but when you have a track that is that fast, that is that twisty, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have it confined between concrete barriers and chain link fencing, because there isn't a lot of room for these guys to go. So I mean, contact with other cars, contact with the walls. It wasn't like this wasn't unexpected. It wasn't a case of if, but it was going to be a case of when. And when that incident did it happen, would it be like we saw with Mick Schumacher going into the wall, like a car just having an off? Would it be a situation with a couple of cars colliding, like we saw with, well, I mean, Max and Lewis is kind of a bit of a bizarre scenario, but I mean, the incidents between, say, Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen, that was a bit of a weird one too, but they just kind of got tangled together. And then Kimi, I think, kind of found himself along for the ride. But the point is that, and I know that they wanted to have a street circuit there, but I mean, Saudi Arabia is a fairly big country. I mean, there's lots of open spaces. And I think that if this track had a lot of space around it, and they were able to have proper runoff areas, I think it would have been it would be a much better circuit, because within the confines that it is, and between those concrete barriers and the chain link fencing, it does make it dangerous. And you're going to get well, obviously you're going to have collisions, but I mean, even the minor ones, just cars coming into to minor contact with one another, you're going to see bits of carbon fiber coming off from wing end plates and from barge boards, etc. I mean, at least next year, with the cars being a little bit simplified, then you're not going to have so many of these peripheral bits hanging off, and that can get knocked off. But that's not really the point. I mean, a track either is or it isn't safe. And I thought it was very interesting too. At one point, I think it was after the Vettel Raikkonen incident, where all these parts started flying off Seb's car, that I think it was Fernando Alonso was saying, well, the track is in the worst condition that we've seen it all weekend long. There's just way too much stuff out here. He said we're traveling out here at 300 kilometers per hour plus, and it's just dangerous now, because I mean, you pick up a piece of those carbon fiber shards, you can potentially get a puncture, and with nowhere to run off, I mean, the chances are that you're going to go into the wall there, so it's dangerous. So when you look at what Checo has to say, he had this to say, quote, "It's a really nice circuit, very dangerous though, in terms of there's a lot of straights, but you're turning and there are blind corners where I hope nothing happens. And if you like, it's too dangerous without a real reason. When you look at some of the onboards, it's quite scary. I just hope that it goes through. We don't see a big shunt out there. I just feel that the track is a bit too risky without a reason. With the speed that we're doing, with the deltas around the track from some of the other cars, it's a bit unnecessary. But I think that probably something that we can review after the weekend," end quote. So George Russell had to say the following. Quote, "It seemed pretty inevitable. You go around a turn two that's fairly wide and open. Cars can go side by side, and then it really funnels in and goes pretty narrow pretty fast. I came around a blind corner and cars were everywhere. I slowed down and then got completely hit from behind." So a lot to learn, I think, for a motorsport this weekend, because it's an incredibly exhilarating and exciting track to drive, but it's lacking a lot from a safety perspective and a racing perspective. And there are unnecessary incidents waiting to happen for all these small kinks that are blind, which are not even corners in an F1 car, but they just offer unnecessary danger, end quote. So, I mean, it's not going to be too long. I mean, we're going to be back at Jeddah in March of next year. What with this kind of rearrangement of the schedule makes sense because, we go to the Middle East at the beginning of the year to Bahrain, anyways. So they do have time to figure it out. And I believe that there has been some discussions that they are going to look at that. And it certainly needs to be looked at. I mean, there's always a little bit more danger in some of these street circuits, anyways. But I think the big question here is with the speeds that we're seeing, is this any more than is acceptable anyways? I mean, Monaco is well renowned for being very tight and compact with nowhere really to go, but I mean, the one thing is, and it's not that it makes it any better, but I mean, the top end speeds in Monaco are a lot slower, and there aren't really that many blind corners from compared to Jeddah. Some of the other comments from George Russell were, quote, I think you live and learn from these experiences. You can't blame anybody from trying to make an incredible racetrack, and ultimately that's what they have achieved. But I think nobody foresaw what was about to happen with all these blind corners. In my opinion, yeah, the track changes are needed. You've got so many of these small kinks that are totally unnecessary, and that could just be made into a straight line from turn 2 to turn 4, which could be straight from turn 17 to 22. We've got 5 corners, which is a section which is totally easily flat out, even with the DRS. I don't know what the limitations are, so that also needs to be looked at. And ideally, if that was made into a straight line, the safety would drastically improve. I think they've got the resources here to do it, so it shouldn't be a limitation. Safety needs to come first. If you can improve the danger drastically with small changes, then it's a no-brainer, end quote. So there you go. I think that when the drivers, weigh in on it in such a manner, I think that obviously you have to take that to heart. And ultimately, I mean, it just goes to prove that in this day and age, I mean, carbon fiber notwithstanding, hands devices notwithstanding, halos, and these new helmets that they have, that Formula One, motorsport in general, it's just a dangerous proposition. And I think that it really goes to show that these guys are basically risking it all every time they strap themselves into a Formula One car. I mean, we did see a couple of scary moments on Sunday afternoon. Fortunately, we didn't see anything. Nobody was seriously hurt. I mean, I think that was the one thing that kind of stood out for me for Mick Schumacher's accident, the way that he spun off going into the corner there, was that he basically hit the wall at a 90-degree angle. And regardless, if you have a hands device and all the cushioning around the cockpit, I mean, you're basically hitting the car at, like I say, perpendicular to the wall. And just the opportunity for the neck to snap like that is, potentially very, very dangerous. Anyways, just a couple of other things here before I kind of I try to collect my thoughts here about going into next weekend. I talked about this on Thursday night, just about this deal between Mercedes and Kingspan, this Irish insulator that was involved in this Grenfell Tower fire and disaster in June 2017. So they did sign a deal, excuse me, to be a sponsor for Mercedes. This really kicked off a lot of outrage from survivors and family members for people that suffered and were killed in this tragedy. Hamilton did say something short about it. He said, quote, it's not something I feel I have to speak of publicly. It has nothing to do with the team signing of any of the sponsors. Well, end quote. Maybe perhaps for the one of Tommy Hilfiger, because that's the only sponsor that Lewis himself brought to Mercedes. Anyways, Toto Wolff said that is something that they could reevaluate this deal after the uproar. Toto had the following to say, quote, we have discussed also that with the important people, we will reach out to Kingspan and come up with the right solution. There's a contractual agreement that's behind these things, and we just want to do the right thing with integrity, and that's why I don't want to further comment, end quote. So we'll see. It was an interesting one, and certainly, so I guess the big controversy is with the products that they made were part of the reason of the big disaster and led to the loss of life. So signing a sponsorship deal with a very high profile team like Mercedes is obviously very, very controversial. Anyways, I'm going to start wrapping this one up now, but just to kind of finish off some of these thoughts, we get now a week. We get very, very little time now to sit back, to think, and really think about what happened today and digest it. And we're going to do it all over again here on less than a week from now. And this time you can base, I don't want to say you can forget about all the previous 21 races, but you know what I mean, right? I mean, it basically comes down to it's an even slate, winner takes all. I mean, the constructors has to be pretty much a wrap unless by some bizarre reason both Mercedes cars have, some unfortunate circumstance that leads them to score no points, and Red Bull really bags a lot of points. I mean, it was really disappointing. I mean, for Red Bull today with Checo going out, that they're down to 50% of their point scoring capacity, what with only having Max out there. And of course, Bottas was able to take that for the third position away from Esteban Ocon very, very late in the race there, and get some more points for the constructors. So that one I think is pretty much is sewn up again for Mercedes. That will win what was this, their seventh, eighth in a row now. I've almost lost count of it, but as we go into this final race, when it does come down to Lewis and Max, I just really want to see a clean race between the two of them. If Lewis has the advantage, he's going to pass Max. I just hope that Max does the right thing, and on and that goes for the the flip side of that as well. I mean, Lewis always talks about doing it the right way, doing it the clean way, and I don't suggest that he would push him off, Max off, um, if Max is pushing him and he has the advantage to do so. So I really don't know what to say more than that. I really, really hope that it's a clean race. I hope it's exciting race. I hope it's not anticlimactic. I hope that it runs the entire length of the race, and that either Lewis or Max doesn't have a mechanical issue and a DNF, because that would just be disappointing. I just want to see it won cleanly and fairly. I mean, if it's a great move, the way that Max put on that third restart up the inside there to win it, or if Lewis puts a great move on Max, that's what we're all here for. We're here to watch good, clean, exciting racing. And that's really what I really hope to see. Anyways, I don't know what else to say other than that. Just kind of like going down the constructors again, looking at these things. I was kind of surprised when I was followed. I had to look at the final race classification at the end of the race to see where the McLaren cars had finished up, where the Ferrari cars had ended up, and how that really didn't change the constructor standings very much to what it was previously going into that one. And it was kind of a bit of a profound moment, and I'd realized I was so focused on what was happening at the front. I was so focused on what was happening between Lewis and Max, that I completely forgotten about what was happening up and down the rest of the running order. And I completely had not realized that Ricardo had finished where he did, where Carlos and Charles had finished where they did, where Lando had finished up where he did, and all these other things that were going on. Because every time something happened, I found myself going back and watching, okay, what happened between Lewis and Max here? What happened there? Okay, all these different things. I found that I was so hyper focused on what was happening between Hamilton and Verstappen, that basically the other 18 cars out there was almost it wasn't a point of interest for me. And I cannot recall a race, at least in recent memory, that I've been that focused on two cars like that. And I guess, at least in my defense, you can see why, because these are the two guys that are fighting for the big prize there. But still, it was very, very it was a very, very interesting moment to kind of really go down and see that final race kind of classification just after the race had ended. I was just like, okay, well, how did he end up there, and how did they end up there? It was a very, very strange moment. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks, guys, for all of you that joined into the live stream tonight. I know it was a little bit later than usual. Again, I needed extra time to collect my thoughts on this one. I don't know how coherent it was, but hey, I think we're all kind of feeling the same on this one. It was like I say, it was to say it was crazy and dramatic and all of those things is an understatement to say the least. Anyways, if you want to get in touch, by also do so. Um, Please send us a tweet at Scuderia F1 Pod. On the flip side, if you want to send us an email, please send us an email at scuderiapod at gmail.com. And that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care. Have a great race. Mark and I will be back on Thursday night to preview the season finale. Can you believe it? Until then, have a great week, guys, and we'll talk